As an example, you have a 2-year-old child that disappears, and people start searching, and you walk up to, say, a swamp area. Okay, so the searchers may drag the swamp, and searchers may ignore the swamp. But one thing you're not going to do, you're not going to cross the swamp and go to an island, because that 2-year-old's not going to be able to get to the island. Yet there's probably 10, 12 cases I cite in the book where a person's eventually found on that island, or they're found laying on a bush in an area that searchers had to go chest deep in order to get there. And it's almost an unfathomable degree of effort to get to the point where the child's at, and when the searchers get there, they're shaking their heads about what they find. Now, how they get there sometimes is there's strange noises that they hear. Maybe there's some other element that pushes them to that place that wasn't noted in the article, but there's nothing obvious that gets them there. It isn't a canine that wants to swim across the bog to get there. It's just an inhuman effort to get there. But where they're found is unbelievable. So the state of Pennsylvania has more children that have disappeared between, say, 1946 and 1959 than any other time in recent history in the U.S. They have more kids that are missing during those years in that area than, say, a factor times 10 than anywhere in the U.S. And I have a map of Pennsylvania on my wall with all of the disappearances on it, and it's absolutely unbelievable. And we call Pennsylvania a cluster in itself because there's so many kids that have disappeared there. And not only are there clusters there, but there's clusters inside clusters. And going back to my law enforcement days, when a suspect commits a crime, they usually don't commit that crime real close to home for a multitude of reasons. People in the neighborhood know the car, people in the neighborhood may be able to identify you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there's 2 different areas in Pennsylvania where you could almost make out a circle on the map where kids have disappeared, but inside that circle, there's nothing. And in the far northwestern region of Pennsylvania, there's a huge national forest that borders New York, and right now there's 5 disappearances exactly on the perimeter of that national forest, but nothing inside that national forest. But if you thought about this rationally, when families and things go into those national forests to vacation or whatever, you'd expect the kids to disappear inside the national forest. Yet these are on residences, rural farms, vacation homes, and things right on the perimeter and not inside. We thought that was really odd. We were talking about this the other day. It's still happening, but the numbers within that year span will just jump right out at you. And the mere number of kids that have disappeared in Pennsylvania has continued on over the years, along with some adults, along with some unbelievable stories, along with those disappearances. And it's one of those few places where there's been double disappearances. Say 2 kids go away at the same time, they're not found. A year later, they're found on a hillside miles away, laying next to each other, dead. It would almost indicate that somehow or another those kids were placed there on that hillside, both dead. It's so far beyond a mere coincidence. It's unreal. When it's difficult sometimes going back 50 years to determine what the weather was when a person disappears or immediately afterwards. But when the articles state, yeah, all of a sudden a storm developed, and the storm lasted for 2 weeks that this person was gone, and it rained, 20 inches in those 2 weeks. It was a completely unbelievable storm. You start to read about these storms that all of a sudden happen either when the person disappears or immediately afterwards. And they even talk about it wipes out any evidence of the person being there. There's no tracks. It's harder for the canines to track. Blah, 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 blah. Searchers are compromised because the creek's higher. It goes on and on and on. And it's definitely one of the major elements in these stories.